Okay, let's do this. We're going to start with our power rankings reaction. This, in my opinion, was probably, like, my worst power rankings, or, like, one of my worst. I really don't think this aged well at all, because there's a bunch of teams that I just, like, underrated like crazy that were way better. Like, I feel horrible about these power rankings looking back at it, so this is going to be a good time. Drink water, okay. All right, let's do it. Okay. All right, past ATP, what do you got for us?
Number 20, the Los Angeles Valiant.
Good start.
Yeah, no surprises with this one. They're just not built for success. And the management knows this too. You can't really expect to build a successful roster in a matter of months after everything that has occurred. Crystal and WYA, I think they could both be nice pieces on this roster, but even with their potential strong points in mind, there are some pretty nasty drawbacks. For one, having a former tank player pick up main support for the first time in his career could be an absolute nightmare. This sounds like Cookie 2.0 just waiting to happen.
True.
That I've yet to name, I think they're all relatively unproven outside of maybe a few things they all specialize in. Being that lackluster with such a minuscule rotation does not sound promising. I honestly can't say for certain if the Valiant are the definitive number 20 team in the league.
Oh, they are.
If they had the opportunity to play everybody at once, maybe they could move up a spot or two. But I place the Valiant here with their final record in mind. They are playing in Asia, where the competition is going to be rather tight. You're not going to come across many low-tier teams in this region. The other bottom-of-the-barrel teams are all in North.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, like, there's some pretty meh teams, I feel like, in APAC.
America, essentially. It may be a challenge for the Valiant to come across many wins.
True.
At least some of the not-so-good teams in NA have the opportunity to beat up each other. The Valiant have no such luxury. But who knows? Maybe the Valiant are going to prove me wrong like they did last year.
Nope, not quite.
State that they're not like the 2018 Shanghai Dragons in terms of levels of bad, so perhaps they'll give us a preview of what's to come in future seasons.
Well, I don't think those reports were very accurate based off of what I saw.
But for now, they shall remain at the number 20 spot on my list.
Congrats, ATP. You got the easiest thing ever right. Good job, man. Woo! So good. And I mean, yeah, the Valiant were awful. And I mean, arguably, like, statistically, they're technically, like, the worst ever. Like, obviously, they didn't lose as many games as Shanghai back in the day, but, like, they won, like, their map win percentage was worse, I'm pretty sure, than that 2018 Shanghai team, which is, like, a big yikes. They won, like, 2 maps the whole year. It was terrible. Okay, let's keep it going. Yeah, I think 0-40 Dragons might beat the Valiant, too, to be honest with you. Maybe an Epic 5 mapper. I don't know. I overestimated Valley. I mean, kind of.
Number 19, the Vancouver Titans.
Hey, not bad. You got another easy one right. By not bad, I mean, wow, congrats. You want a cookie? Good job, dude.
How the mighty have fallen. Just a year ago, the biggest concern was if Fissure would be the right fit on the squad.
Oh, man, imagine that. I feel like that was ages ago already when Fissure was on the team. Sag, I miss the runaway Titans.
About literally everything. Their mix of contenders, talent, and veterans is not looking too hot. They appear to be the clear-cut worst team in North America on paper.
I mean, honestly, with the way London played, I mean, it was really close, right? For a while, it's like, who's worse? Which team is worse? I mean, it literally came down to a 5-mapper to see which one of them was actually the worst team in NA. Like, jeez.
What gets you excited about this roster?
Nothing.
Maybe Teru as a wild card, I guess?
Not
Perhaps
really.
There's a world where he becomes the modern-day Saya player, but in the flex DPS role?
Definitely not. He tried his best. He had that cool Genji play and like a couple of other plays, but definitely not what Saya was to Florida in 2018.
But what else really is there? Maybe a decent year from Dalton, maybe Shredlock or FRD/Fried.
Shredlock. Did not anticipate him retiring just all of a sudden, that's for sure.
Just lack playmakers and consistency on this roster, and it really doesn't help that their support situation and DPS rotation is kind of dire. I am fully expecting this to be another live and learn type of season where this franchise tries to find a few positives to take into the next year. Good luck, Vancouver. This could get rough. Number 8.
It certainly was rough. But yeah, I mean, mostly everything I said there, I guess, was like, okay. You got the final regular season standings on another screen. Yeah, I'm looking at it. Because, so far, I mean, technically that's 2 for 2 in terms of, like, the actual, like, you know, like, standings. Like, those were the 2 worst teams record-wise.
18, the Paris.
Yeah, no, this one was
Funny how they
bad.
still end up in the same spot as my.
But in my defense, I feel like not a lot of people rated Paris high. In my defense, not a lot of people expected them to be what they were. I saw a couple of people, like, I don't know if you're in the chat, probably not, but there's this one guy who said, I think you're really underestimating Paris. Khan and Naga are going to be amazing, and he was right. He or she was right.
Rankings last year, even after all of the stuff that happened. Could that mean I'm in for another painfully wrong prediction? Probably.
Yes, past ATP. Very much so, a very wrong and bad prediction.
I can't deny the serious regressions compared to last year, which makes me think they finished somewhere close to the bottom. It's not like in 2020 where they made upgrades and they had a promising coaching staff.
But even so, they found a way to keep winning anyway. Even so, with downgrades in mind, they still found a way, which is really impressive. Big shout out to Avala, the general manager of Paris. She really killed it. She wasn't given a lot of resources, but she still found a way to make a team work. She deserves all the praise in the world.
They literally downgraded their entire team. As I've mentioned numerous times already, if you've watched me cover Paris, I like Naga, I like Onigod, I like Khan, and
I mean, those guys were pretty good. I mean, not Onigod, I mean, excuse me, Don, or not Don, God, I keep messing up names. Khan and Naga are both really good. Like, they exceeded my expectations. I already thought they were going to be the best players on the team, but they were, like, really, really good.
I kind of like alexyOWL too, but that's half a team to feel reasonably confident in, and they might not be true stars on their own if they're. I
feel like that was a fair criticism, and when Neptuno did play, he was not very good. I think we saw that firsthand, but the moment that Dridro came in, it was like a match. Dridro was so much better. And then Don also, like, I heard so many people say Don wasn't supposed to be good, but he really surprised me too. That's part of the reason I rated Paris so low. I did not think Don and Neptuno were going to pull their weight.
Dan on paper appears to be one of the worst.
Oh yeah, I used to call him Dan. I didn't know his name. I heard ZP. His name was Dan.
Tanks in the league. I worry about his ability to keep up with a majority of his competition in North America. Neptuno has kind of, fallen out of the loop, for a lack of better words.
That was pretty true.
Clear that the competition is elevated to the point where he's fallen out of relevance. I have a few question marks how he's going to fare outside of Mercy.
Oh, yeah.
Regardless of why they're in the situation they're in.
I think it was against Vancouver at him. That was brutal.
It's going to be an uphill battle for the Paris Eternal for sure. Number 17.
Oh, boy. Yeah, before we talk about that, yeah, Paris, that take was obviously not good, but I don't feel too bad about Paris because I know a lot of people didn't really rate them high. So, yeah.
This team on paper isn't awful, but for league standards, it's lackluster.
Yeah, if only you knew, buddy.
Team is going to live and die by their DPS, and happy as the projected starters could be dangerous.
Which they kind of were.
Serious damage when firing on all cylinders.
And I mean, to be fair, when they were
able to will this team to a few upset
the rotation, Pepe laugh.
But Crimzo and Juby can only get you so far.
Oh, Crimzo. He proved me wrong so hard. Like, I wasn't that impressed when he played on Dallas. I mean, holy. He was so good. Great player that I did not expect to be.
But another
when, like, fans could actually be excited about them. Houston, I really just didn't know what to think of Piggy and Jongu along with the support line. Like, people think he's really solid Ryan, but Piggy would just played out of this world. He was just, 16th isn't that far off from where they actually finished. They were 18th.
Spitfire. Now, this is a team that I find kind of intriguing. They're attempting to go through the whole homegrown talent path thing. On the surface, they're not going to go far, but there's a lot of latent potential within this group. I commonly refer to them as the top team in my lowest tier of NA teams. They have some notable advantages over some of the teams I previously noted. Most notably would probably be these...
They definitely weren't the best of those bottom teams, buddy.
Superior synergy factor. That familiarity and confidence gives them a serious edge. I'm also pretty confident in what their tanks can do. Hadi and Molfig were a strong duo of European contenders, and I suspect that they could be a huge difference maker in a lot of these games, which you would consider winnable on their schedule.
Yeah, I would not say that their tank line was the reason they got a win.
DPS could be pretty deadly. Signing Shax after the whole Valiant disaster was an absolutely massive signing.
I feel like it could have been if London were better. To be fair, when London actually won their game, Shax, played a role in it, but other than that, I mean, Shax didn't play amazing. The synergy just wasn't there with the team, I feel like. So, nah, that wasn't it, Chief.
He could be a real superstar, not just on the Tracer, but in the general hit scan role. And don't be sleeping on Blase. Just being on a team with more confidence and a better sense of direction could be enough to see him finally realize his potential.
Well, unfortunately, no. Blase just... I feel like he's just unlucky, and he always ends up on teams that aren't supposed to be good. Poor guy. Blase definitely was not someone that people regretted sleeping on, I feel like. Unfortunately. I had high hopes. You know, I like Blase, but all he does is play on not-so-great teams.
He's very flexible, and I think that both him and Shax could be a nice 1-2 punch. And it could become a solid trio once their young hitscan prospect Sparker turns 18.
Yeah, I feel like London's DPS definitely did look a bit more explosive when Sparker came. I had a lot of hype for Sparker, and I feel like he didn't necessarily let us down despite, you know, playing on a not good team.
All of these factors combined could be enough to see them earn a few respectable victories this year. But even so, I'm not expecting much from London in the grand scheme of things. They're simply teams with better coaching and more superstars. Not only that, but there's a clear-cut weakness in Kelix in my opinion. They can only do so much to hide him, especially when they're playing a decent or above average opponent. But even if they don't go very far this year, it could still be pretty fun to watch them, especially as a London fan, for those of you who are loving the nearly full EU representation they have going on. I look forward to seeing what this group can do.
Yeah, no, I have nothing to say. Let's just keep going. That London take was like okay. I mean, could have been worse, could have been better.
Number 15, the Atlanta Reign. They're basically a better version of the Outlaws. That's
my
best way of describing
well,
the Reign.
they were better than the Outlaws. Pepe laugh.
Their biggest strength is DPS. A killer rotation of Pelican, Kai, and Edison is going to be the driving force behind how far this team can go.
I mean, Pelican definitely was important. Same with Kai. I mean, so far you're saying the right things, but you don't have this team in the right place.
They should have what it takes to hang in there with even some of the best players in the world.
That's true.
Kai alone makes you feel pretty good if you're an Atlanta fan. He was such a difference maker on the Valiant last year. If the Reign can play around him and their other playmakers, perhaps they can pull off some serious upsets. But it's hard to imagine this team being very consistent outside of DPS.
Oh, no.
Hawk and Gator, they aren't that great. Let's call it how it is. They killed it in Contenders a few years ago, but the Overwatch League has proven to be completely...
Okay, time out. To be fair, Gator and Hawk did not play that well in Season 3. Alright? And also, Maso had a down year in Season 3. And I was doubting Iris as well at the time because, like, I didn't know if he could synergize with, like, a mostly Western team. So I feel like some of these criticisms are fair. It's just I think I underestimated them too hard. That's the problem.
Completely different beast. This especially goes for Gator, who was not that great out of Orisa last year. Meanwhile, you have an unproven flex support in Iris, along with Masa, who's shown signs of decline compared to his fantastic rookie year. So again, it's the same situation as the Outlaws, where it feels like the DPS are the only ones who can keep up against the stronger teams in the league. But honestly, their roster might not even be the biggest issue. The coaching situation is a nightmare.
I feel like at the time I wasn't really... I don't know when they got Unter. I mean, maybe I didn't trust Unter enough to carry them because I've just never been a Sephi fan. That's also that's always been part of my issue with Atlanta. I just don't really like him very much.
Season 3 saw the Reign either poorly executing strategies or running the wrong things in their games. This is something that Dogman himself has talked about on his talk show, The Dustin Bowerman Show.
The good old Dustin Bowerman Show.
As of this moment, the situation is looking grim. It's like the Reign are going to be no better than middle of the pack.
Oh, he was mid-season. Okay. See, that makes more sense, because I feel like I probably would have been a bit more hyped about their coaching staff. See, I couldn't remember when they got him. That makes more sense.
Which basically puts them in the same situation as last year, where they beat the teams you would expect them to, but then they lose to any of the elite teams of North America. Number 14.
Okay, so... No, Dogman, like, occasionally goes on his YouTube. I don't really see him that much anymore. He kind of, like, streams instead. Hey, thank you, Yal. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I do intend to keep up the good work, and I appreciate the kind words. Something else with Atlanta, I mean, I think part of my main issue with them was just that I didn't really expect the tank line to bounce back as much as they did. Like, I know I just talked about that before, but, like, I really didn't think Hawk was going to play as good as he did. Like, Hawk played at, like, you know, like an all-star level. He was really, really good. And I just didn't think he had it in him to play like that. And also, I think the Reign, they were just more flexible compared to last year. I think the synergy was better. They just improved. That's all there really is to say. And I didn't think they had it in them to improve at that kind of level. Like, Iris was so good. Yeah. Really amazing. I really loved his Baptiste. His Ana was great. I didn't think Iris had it in him to fit in with that team, but he proved me wrong, just like everyone else on that team did. Not only were they nowhere near the bottom of the conference, but they're freaking grand finals runner-ups. I mean, that's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good if you ask me. So yeah, I very much regret that Atlanta pick. I think that's easily one of my worst takes of all time. Maybe even the worst.
Guangzhou Charge. I don't know, man. This Charge team doesn't really call out to me. They were close to...
They called out to you even less than you thought. I actually overrated the Charge. And coming into this year, I thought 14 was, like, maybe a little harsh, but they're even worse than I thought.
Where they needed to be last year, but we're still a few upgrades away from being that true contender. But this offseason, well, unfortunately kind of saw them take a few steps in the wrong direction. They still have some nice pieces, like Krong and Eileen still being here is great, and I think their new DPS look pretty promising as well. But
I mean, you're half right. Choi Se-Wan was good.
support line took a major hit.
True.
Losing Shu really hurt. He was a top 5 flex support in the league last year, and arguably in Season 2 as well for some people, and while not out of this world amazing, Chara also had a pretty solid year in 2020. So to go from that to Mondu and Kariv, it's kind of concerning. It's not to say they can't be good, it's just hard to envision them reaching that high of a level. Kariv is still a pretty good playmaker, but he does kind of lack the consistency compared to somebody of Shu's caliber, and I'm not entirely sure if Mondu can achieve the same level of value as Chara outside of Lucio.
Yeah, not even close. I mean, I didn't even think, like, Chara was, like, good in Season 3, but, like, it wasn't amazing. But Mondu was just, he had a poor year. It just wasn't meant to be.
The downgraded support is enough on its own to really halt this team's progress, but the fact that they're likely not the only problem Guangzhou could be dealing with is pretty concerning. There's too many question marks with the Charge, which makes me think this is going to be a tough year for them where they really get put through the ringer.
Yeah, I think part of my other issues, they still never really addressed main tank seriously. You're gonna head out. Good to see you, Sean. Like, they got Ji-hoon, but no one was really expecting him to be the starter. I feel like maybe outside of, like, a ball meta. I just think that the Charge needed, like, a serious shake-up at main tank. Like, Rio's just decent. I feel like they need something more than decent because, you know, they already have Krong, so if you can get someone, like, of his caliber at main tank, you're gonna be all set.
Things are going to be tight, and it feels to me like they're bound to have a down year as a result.
True. Very, very true. I feel like that, I mean, aside from rating them a bit too high in, like, the overall standings, I guess you could say, that was, like, a okay take. But again, I feel like that was kind of a no-brainer for most people. I mean, the Charge really just did make a lot of downgrades. Yeah, 13th Boston isn't that bad. I mean, what, like, 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. I mean, they finished, like, 15th, so we're not too far off.
Number 13, the Boston Uprising. This one might surprise some people. Boston being this high, I know it might sound crazy, but I actually have a lot of trust in this new direction they're taking.
Maybe a bit too much trust. I definitely overrated Boston a little bit.
They're truly rebuilding the right way for once. Through the addition of promising young talent, well-established veterans, and a well-respected coach, the Uprising feel like that team who could be really annoying to face.
And for some teams, they kind of were. I mean, that's not horrible. I mean, that Houston game, I mean, remember when Houston got destroyed by them and Valentine's Genji and everything? So, like, I'm, like, half right, I guess. I mean, that wasn't always the case, but there were some games where Boston were kind of annoying.
From WGS Phoenix will serve as a nice boost. I'm 37 and Valentine are going to be a strong duo, no.
I'm 37 was not very impressive. I'm a little disappointed because I thought he was, like, okay on WGS, but I felt like only Valentine was only, like, consistently pulling his weight, excuse me. Yeah, they also lost to the Titans. 2019 runaway if they reunited. Yeah, I don't know if they'd be a top 5 team. Probably not.
doubt about it. Meanwhile, faith has been growing on me as of late. I have more confidence than I used to that he could be a pretty decent main support at the Overwatch League level.
And I think he was. I mean, he didn't blow you away, but he wasn't bad either.
And he's got the ever so dangerous Myungbong in his second year to back him up.
Myungbong wasn't as good as I thought he'd be this year.
I'm loving the idea of Soon coming in for double sniper and Tracer.
Sag, if only I knew. I made this video like days before Soon got not released. I mean, when they parted ways. I think I probably would have rated them a bit lower if I knew that was coming, because I thought Soon was going to be really nice for them. Unlucky.
Metas as well. The combined contenders and veteran core is something I can get behind. I only have two real gripes with this roster. For one, I'm a little nervous about their tanks. Stand 1 and Punk have potential, but they...
Punk I definitely underrated like crazy. I mean, the Stand 1 take isn't that bad, but like Punk played way better than I thought he would. I mean, he looked really good.
Don't feel like the type of duo who can keep up with the elite tanks of the game. My other issue is that they're lacking the general superstars needed to be a serious threat.
That's not bad either. I mean, I wasn't wrong technically, even if it's kind of obvious.
I feel like they're a year off from becoming someone to worry about. But even so, Boston could end up having a respectable season with some potential upsets along the way.
And I mean, that's kind of what they did. I mean, that's not that bad. Just rated them a little too high in the rankings, that's all.
Which I'm sure is more than enough to satisfy the Boston fans out there. Number 12.
Oh, let's see. What do you think about joining London or Paris coaching squad? I mean, hey, the more the merrier. Why not? This take isn't garbage either, I guess. I mean, what did Toronto finish in the overall standings? 2019, let's see, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. They're like, what, 11th place? So, not bad. 11th, 12th place, something like that.
The Toronto Defiant. Much like Boston, Toronto could be capable of some great things this year. It's nothing to write home about, but they do have a lot of what they need to potentially turn some heads. Led by KDG at coaching, plus Sato, Hisu, and Lastro for star power, the Defiant have a solid core.
I mean, maybe solid isn't the word that I should have used there, but I mean, they're okay. They're okay.
Who I consider to be the best mid-tier team in North America.
I'd say they're one of the better mid-tier teams, I guess. I mean, if that's really even something to celebrate.
And I believe they have the best shot of making a surprise playoff run if everything clicks.
And I mean, they did make the play-in tournament, so not too far off. Do I think Seoul will pick up another tank besides Smurf? I believe they said they might be done with their roster, so I don't really know.
But the problem is their roster as a whole doesn't quite match up with the top dogs.
Yep.
How trustworthy are Michelle, Ansun J, Logix, and Neist? Michelle and Logix, I know they can be good, but there is no...
It's funny because I feel like Neist was arguably the best of those three. I mean, Logix never played, but I mean, Michelle was good too, I guess.
This especially goes for Logix, who is known for being a streaky player.
Yeah, if only Logix actually got to play. Pepe laugh.
How reliable can he be in a high-stakes game?
The answer is non-existent because he didn't play ATP.
For the rookies, they're not guys I'm incredibly high on. Nice does not feel like the best option at flex DPS.
He was okay.
I feel a bit better about him because he was okay. Have a bit more relevance as of late, but he's not at the same level as the star players of this roster, if you know what I mean. I worry how he's going to hold up against some of the premier main supports of the league. I will say, though, if KDG can work his magic, this team could end up being something special.
And at times they seem like they might be on the trend for that, but they just, I don't know, they weren't consistent enough, didn't have the star power.
They just need a few things to click, because they already have quite a few reliable playmakers on hand. Now all they really need is for the question marks to stay out of their own way. Number 11. Looking back at this one, making the script for this, constructing the rankings, I almost put Chengdu like multiple spots higher. I genuinely consider putting them over Seoul in like a couple of other teams, but I just wasn't sure. Like, I saw the upgrades, I was so hyped they got Gaga, but I just didn't know if it was worth it because, you know, Chengdu have always been so weird and wacky and inconsistent in the past, so I felt like rating them too high was too risky, but I really wish I did go out and be bold and risky and put them higher, because I regret it now, because they finished higher than bottom half of the league. Chengdu Hunters. Now this is one of those teams you have to be careful with. Chengdu are full of surprises, it's what they're known for. I have made the mistake of overestimating them before, so I'm trying not to fall into the same trap. This year definitely does feel like their best chance yet to be competitive, but you can
I mean, that was true. That was true. They were pretty competitive.
never be too careful with this type of team. I definitely do like some aspects of this team a lot though. They added a ton of rookie talent, and maybe a few of those guys could turn out to be difference makers. I especially feel this way about Gaga, who is a dominant force in contenders. I'm kind of liking their DPS quite a bit as well. They should make for nice complementary pieces alongside Leave.
I mean, I feel like most of those guys were just meh. Hey, what's up, Beast? Good to see you. I mean, like, Jimbo had his moments, but that was, like, second half of the year. But, like, the new guys they got, like, Jimmy and Kaneki, Taro Cookie, they're pretty irrelevant.
Simple fact that this team can now be halfway decent on something outside of Wrecking Ball metas is something I also feel pretty optimistic about. But there's a few things that stop me from rating them as a top-tier team. I mean, for starters, they're known for being weird, and it's hard to imagine that changing no matter what they end up doing.
I mean, they were weird, but not in the same weird way as previous years, I guess. Oh, what's up, Genesis? Good to see you.
Also, the off-tank and support situation could be a cause for concern. Elsa underperformed last
I
time.
mean, Elsa, before he suddenly retired, was genuinely, like, pretty decent. Some would argue solid. He was pretty good. I mean, Late Young did okay as well afterwards, and their supports were pretty good. Not top tier, but I liked the job that Monk and Yveltal and Nisha did overall.
It wasn't even that great back in Season 2. Let's say RUI gets him back on the right track. Can I reasonably expect him to be better than average? It really does not feel like it.
He kind of was.
Especially with some of the off-tanks he'll be going up against on a regular basis in Asia.
He held his own, man. He held his own. You weren't right there.
And I kind of feel a similar way about Nisha. It's the same situation, but at main support. Chengdu have a ton of upside, but a bit too many concerns for my liking. Number 10.
I mean, this isn't horribly far off. I mean, like, it is kind of far off, but could have been worse, I guess. I mean, a lot of people really did not like this take, but I was just so worried that Seoul were going to pull the same nonsense as they did last year, basically. Or 2020, I guess you could say. I don't know. I didn't think Fitz was going to progress even more than he did. I still had questions about the tanks. I just wasn't entirely sure about some things. And they ended up being consistent this year, but not the consistency that Seoul fans were looking for, because they're, like, consistently not showing up in the big moments.
The Seoul Dynasty. The divided opinions on them make me feel like smack dab in the middle is the perfect placement. I find it
not quite perfect. I'm doing well, Beast.
Funny because I'm kind of on both sides. I'm not a complete believer, but also rate them a bit higher than most haters. They're somehow getting too much credit, but also not enough at the same time. Here's my opinion on Seoul.
And those takes were crazy that I saw for Seoul, you know? Like, that's why it was so hard for me to decide for myself, because I saw some people saying they're not going to be good. People are overrating them. And other people are like, they went to the grand finals, forehead. Like, it was crazy.
Given that their roster is largely still the same, it's clear they're capable of some pretty high peaks. But because they're still the same, that also means they're likely going to have a lot of low points. Despite making the grand finals last year, I can't help but worry about the inconsistencies. Sometimes Chengdu...
They're inconsistent in the important games, I guess. Well, consistently not showing up in them.
Simply cannot get his team to adjust. His team finds itself greatly depending on a good meta to go places. Yeah, it worked out for them in the playoffs last year, but what are the odds it happens again? It's a major gamble. How can I feel super good about a team who gets hot and cold at a moment's notice? Given that...
I'm doing well, Beast. Thank you.
They're incredibly similar to last year's roster. I could totally see them finishing like top half of the standings, or at least close to it. They didn't make enough upgrades to get out of the average zone. I feel...
They certainly were above average. It's just they're average in the playoffs, I guess.
Reasonably good about their supports, and I'm happy they have 2U as their full-time off-tank now, but I do kind of have concerns about main tank in particular, because Gesture, he was inconsistent last year, and it's been a full year since Marvel truly played main tank full.
And to be fair, the main tank situation was definitely weird at times. It's funny because when Gesture did start playing well, they started like not playing him. It was really weird. It was really, really weird. Like Gesture like had some bad moments and he like took a break. He came back, he was good. And then all of a sudden Marvel was playing, even though Gesture was like starting to genuinely look reliable again. Seoul's coaching was just so weird. I'm so happy Changgun's gone. He's so weird, man.
Time. Can either of those guys play the way they used to? I'm really not sure. And what about the DPS? They weren't always in tip-top shape last year. Some metas absolutely killed Prophet and Fitz, and all they did to try to improve them.
They were certainly the most consistent part of the team, so yeah, there's no reason to worry about them. Chengdu on the Spark I'm not happy with. I just don't like him. I really don't. He's so weird.
That rotation is signed Sabiobi, who really won't be that useful, I feel like, outside of Tracer or maybe a couple of other things.
Well, you're even more off than you thought with that, because he didn't play at all.
They needed more. This team has decided to live and die by the right meta. I don't care what they've been doing in scrims or any rumors you might have heard. At the core, they are still the Seoul Dynasty. This is where they stay until they prove me wrong. Number 9.
Okay, this one's bad, but do I think it was a mistake bringing back Wizard Young? I mean, since he's not like a head coach or anything, I don't mind that much.
The Hangzhou Spark.
Yeah, the Spark were just a mess. I did not foresee them going through like 4 head coaches in 1 year, you know? That's just, if I knew they were going to go through multiple head coaches all in the matter of months, there's no way I would have put them this high.
Feel weirdly excited and nervous about this group at the same time. At face value, they have a pretty sick team. Their roster is very deep. All of their positions are quite
maybe a bit too deep, I guess.
Versatile, which gives them tools for basically any meta you can think of. Giving Guxue some support with other Chinese players is a nice bonus as well. The sheer fact that he could finally have a Chinese off-tank partner is good enough on its own for him.
He didn't even play. I mean, it was still just Bernard all the time.
The Spark could also just go with Takoyaki and Bernard if they're feeling a fully Korean
Rip Takoyaki.
lineup. I love when a team has options. Having a choice can be a huge difference maker. However, I fear that the way the Spark have gone about doing it could serve as a double-edged sword. On one hand, having lots of Chinese and Korean options means they can basically...
They didn't really do that much at all, to be honest.
However, that could also mean they aren't always fielding their best players. Let's say the number of Korean players you want in the lineup outweighs the number...
I mean, they technically weren't always fielding their best players once that whole MCD drama came out.
...number of Chinese. But you really need like Guxue and, let's say, League at the same time. It could be a challenge to be on the same page. It's not like the last 2 years where it was only 1 or maybe 2 players at once to worry about with a language barrier. There's 5 of them now. On paper, their options are very nice. They're solid from a pure skill perspective. But what happens when we dig below the surface? As much as I love their players, I fear a culture divide could keep this team from realizing their true potential.
I mean, if you think about the MCD thing that happened, I mean, technically there was a supposed, like, you know, culture divide because he said some, like, not so great things.
The Spark have a lot of challenges to overcome. So while the upside is fantastic, their season could fall off the rails very fast if they aren't careful. Number 8.
Oh, yeah, this one's not going to be pretty. Oh, I had so much faith in this team and they let me down. Oh, man. This team was just not what I thought they were. I put too much stock into their new talent. I really did.
The New York Excelsior. I know. I'm going back on my word here. I originally said this team is no better than top 9 in my team preview video from a month ago.
Oh, yeah, they were nowhere near top 9.
But I've undergone a change of heart since then. The more I think about this roster, the more confident I feel. Despite starting over with so many young players, I'm feeling pretty good about them. Let's face it, a rebuild was absolutely necessary.
True.
3 years of the same result and the same shortcomings is way too much. They honestly made the right decision. While a few of their new additions could be slight downgrades compared to what they were working with in the
I'd say arguably more than a few were downgrades.
past, it's really not as bad as some people are making it out to be. Going from Mono to Yakpung and Animo to Friday are the only things that really stand out to me.
And I mean, Yakpung wasn't bad, but Friday was like just okay.
But it's not like either of these guys are going to be terrible. Yakpung was fantastic in contenders, and Friday could be a really nice complementary piece next to Jonak. Maybe they'll have lower peak, sure, but they could still very much get the job done. Everything else has set them up for potential success. They desperately needed a coaching change, and they made it happen. They replaced Hoppa. They retained Jonik as well. And they're deep.
And I feel like it was a good idea getting rid of Hoppa. I mean, Bianca wasn't the greatest, but when Kalios came in, he was pretty good.
PS situation is looking fire. It honestly might be one of the deadliest rotations in the league. Ivy and this promising group of rookies.
Ivy, Pepe, Hands. If only I knew how irrelevant he was going to be, plus just retiring mid-season. I was so excited for Ivy on this team. Like, I can't even tell you. Because the way he played on Philly, he looked like a superstar. So to see, things turn out the way they did was just very, very depressing.
To be the backbone of this team. Everybody on this roster could be solid, but the DPS likely end up deciding how far this team can go.
Not entirely wrong. I mean, Flora was carrying them on his back all the time.
I believe the NYXL could be sneaky good. Maybe not a top-tier threat, but
they had that one moment where they were sneaky when they snuck into the June Joust tournament, the playoffs. But aside from that, they weren't really sneaky at all, I'd say. They had some pretty, embarrassing losses. Like, they lost to the Charge twice. Like, I don't know how that happens. But, I mean, they had their moments against Philly, too. They beat Philly a couple times when no one was really expecting them to. So they had their sneaky moments, I guess you could say, but nothing that made them overly relevant.
Somebody who could be annoying to deal with. Number 7.
New York were annoying to a couple of teams, but that's about as far as we'll go. With this, I also regret, because I almost put Dallas higher, but kind of like what Chengdu, it's just the franchise's reputation made me want to hold back, and I really regret doing that now. I really, really do, because I thought this roster was good, but I'm like, it's Dallas. They're going to mess it up somehow. I really wish that I just got out of that mindset. Big regret there, because I almost put them top 5, I think, but I decided not to. I just wasn't feeling it. I'm like, they're Dallas. They'll find a way to make everyone disappointed.
The Dallas Fuel. Boy, does it feel weird to call their name so late into a power rankings video. And to be completely honest, I don't have total confidence in my assessment of this roster simply because
Okay, but to be fair, Beast, in Season 1, everyone was excited about Dallas as well. They had, the Envy core, but look what happened to them, you never know what can happen when it's Dallas, just because of, management and whatnot.
Is the Dallas Fuel. High hopes are usually met with broken dreams with this particular franchise, but if there was ever a year to break the cycle of misery, this would be the one.
True, it was. They did break the cycle of misery.
Element Mystic Alumni Core plus Fielder could be the answer to their prayers. Dallas are going all in. They spent a boatload to assemble this roster. This year has to be the one where they post results.
And they did! They did, Dallas fans! Let's go!
There's no excuse. It's now or never. And honestly, they might have what it takes. Hanbin and Fearless have top tank line in the league potential.
And they basically were the top tank line, aside from, Fate, Fate Void. It was those two.
Exy, Sparkle, and Doha offer explosive playmaking. Jexay, Fielder, and Rappel, they offer a wide range of options at support. Then you have Rush, who is a fantastic coach. And most importantly, this is a close group who should have pretty good synergy. But will it be enough? If Dallas are going to go far in the playoffs and regular season tournaments, the meta is going to have to line up perfectly.
Yeah, that was not true at all. They were good all the time. They were literally good all the time.
Because if we're being honest, there's going to be some situations where Dallas falls behind.
I thought that'd be the case. I mean, especially once Exy was gone, you'd think that was the case, right? You'd think that there'd be moments where they'd have trouble, but they're just so smart, they're so talented, they have good coaching, they figured it out anyway.
Most notably would
Drink water, got you.
Any time where they have to play heavy wrecking ball, tracer, or double sniper compositions. Dallas are in one of those situations where they'll likely be competitive, but not always necessarily.
That would be Fury Beast.
To the highest degree. And it is that consistency which makes me not want to put them any higher than number 7 on this list. Number 6, the
Oh, Florida, why weren't you good? Pepe, Hands. Oh, man. I thought Florida were going to be good again. I don't feel too bad about this one. I think I probably overrated Florida a bit, but most people would probably argue they were supposed to be, top 8 or 9, around there. but everything that could have went wrong did go wrong this year, so I don't feel too horrible. I feel bad for Florida because I know they could be so much more. Like, I knew they could have been something great, but things just did not work out. And I mean, yeah, to be fair, they did start off good in the main melee. Things were looking good, but, you know, just a lot of disasters happened that I just did not foresee. Checkmate, main tank, Monka W.
Florida Mayhem. For some, this may seem kind of weird. How could I possibly rate Florida higher than Dallas?
Yeah, how could you, ATP?
To be completely honest, it's kind of just a gut feeling. For some reason, deep down in my heart, I trust Florida to do slightly more. I think they're
If only you knew, bro. If only you knew. If only you could see the future, forehead.
a bit better equipped to deal with more situations. Dallas might have the higher ceiling, but the Mayhem have the better stability.
Dallas did have the higher ceiling, so I guess I was kind of onto something there. Kind of.
But of course, there's a big what-if factor behind this placement, and I think you all know what I'm talking about. This all greatly depends on one man, OG.
Yeah, if only you knew. I mean, emphasis on how much he meant to this team and, you know, just like the importance of him. Like, I don't think I put enough emphasis, and I was like really hyping up that fact, you know, that OG was like really big, and he ended up being even more important to the situation than I ever could have thought.
If he plays the way he did on the Gladiators or the later stages of his career on Dallas, then it could mean big trouble for the Mayhem.
I mean, during May, OG didn't look that bad. I mean, I don't think OG played horribly. It's just, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on with him mentally, I guess, that prevented him from playing altogether, really.
I definitely am worried about how he performs, especially in those Orisa-centric metas, but for some reason, I trust the Mayhem to take care of him. I believe in Kuki to work his magic.
And it looked like that at first, it really did. This was almost a good take. For about 1 month, it was a good take.
If he can't, the Mayhem definitely do take a hit on how far they can go. But let me tell you, Florida could be in for a solid year
nasty
if
shot.
OG gets it together. There won't be a ton of exploitable weaknesses at that point. But even if OG does not play absolutely amazing like he did during the early stages of his career, Florida could still be pretty decent. They have everything else they need. If Yaki, Game Nunjin, BQB, and Gargoyle continue to progress, the Mayhem are going to be scary.
And on paper, they, you know, that's a good core. So, again, I don't feel too horrible about this take.
fully expect them to. I'm a big fan of upgrading main support with Slime and having a third DPS option in Checkmate off the bench as well. However,
if only you knew what they were going to do with that, man.
Consider them to be true title contenders. The general concerns I have make me think that they're going to be no better than top 4 in North America.
Nowhere near that, buddy. Nowhere near that.
Starting off the top 5 is none other than the Philly.
Philly just... I don't know how to explain Philly's season. I just don't. I really do not know where things went wrong. Because in May, they looked pretty darn good. And then they just, like, exploded. They exploded. And started losing games left and right, and that was it. And, like, they recovered in time for playoffs, to be fair. But aside from that, aside from May and the playoffs, yeah. It wasn't the prettiest thing in the world.
I understand the offseason was pretty brutal for this group.
And they still found a way to make playoffs anyway, so props to them.
Lost some vital pieces from that 2020 campaign. But even so, they held together a bit better than I thought they would. Most of the main core is still around. Carpe, Alarm, and Funny Astro
Rest in peace.
Are all respective superstars. And now there's a few more superstars joining the mix. Ivy and Sato were great, but Mono and Rascal could realistically be just as good. That basically leaves Philly with a core full of studs. And while he doesn't possess the...
On paper, it should have been a core full of studs. Stretch break ignored. I'll do it after we're done with this reaction, if that's okay.
Same ceiling as Hisu, Shockwave is pretty capable. The Fusion are absolutely still dangerous. They very well could be competing for the top spot in Asia on any given day. But unfortunately, it's hard to imagine them being as dominant as they once were.
You were onto something there. Kind of. I mean, they definitely were not as dominant as they once were.
And that's due to a few factors, both of which are pretty obvious, I would say. For starters, going from Fury to Poco really hurts your title aspirations.
Yeah, if only you knew that he wasn't even going to play to begin with. Thanks a lot, visa issues.
Poco is genuinely a solid off-tank who should be able to hang in there with a fair amount of his competition, but he's no superstar. He's not at Fury's level. He's noticeably worse on a few different characters. I'm worried he's going to be exploitable against the tougher teams in those critical do-or-die tournament and/or playoff matches.
Just replace, Poco with Hoppa there, and I mean, then it doesn't sound so sad, because Poco never played ever.
The other thing that kind of worries me is the coaching change. It's not to say that 9K is not capable, he's just never coached at this level before, and he does have some pretty big shoes to fill because KDG was a genius last year. It will be very difficult to match what that man was able to pull off. Those two factors make me think that Philly competing for a title is going to be a bit more difficult this year.
Yeah, you forgot about the visa issue thing. If only I knew about that.
They're right there, but exploitable weaknesses aren't going to fly against the big boys. Don't
yeah, Death Clown. I'll have both, I'll have VODs for both reactions on the channel.
get me wrong. Philly should have a pretty solid season. There's so many pieces in place which make you feel very optimistic, but outputting another campaign of last year's caliber is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Huh. I didn't realize I put the Glads at number 4. I really put them this high? I could have sworn I put them lower. That's weird. This ended up not being that bad that I put them 4. Like, they finished 2nd place in North America, and the Chengdu Hunters had more points than them, so technically they finished 4th. Technically, they finished 4th place overall, because Dallas had 17 points, Shanghai had 20, Chengdu had 15, then Gladiators had 14 points. So this was actually a correct take. Dang. Who would have thought I was capable of such a thing?
Number 4, the LA Gladiators. What can I really say about LA that hasn't already been said? This roster is very stacked. Once again, the Gladiators went all out during the offseason, but this appears to be their best haul yet. The upgrades they made at support are tremendous. Shu and Moth have...
And it's funny, because I wasn't even thinking about Skewed. I was thinking about Moth during this, but Skewed was the real hero. Main support, I guess you could say. I mean, he's a flex support, but he played Brig.
Best support line in the league potential. That alone is going to make the Gladiators immensely better, but now you combine that with Birdring coming off a career season and Kevster 1 year better. That could be a scary combination. We're talking 4 starters who could all be considered top tier at their respective positions. But I won't lie, I do have some worries in the back of my mind that prevent me from ranking them any higher. For one, the tanks might not be at the same level as everybody else on the team.
I mean, early on in the season, I feel like this kind of held up to be true, but as the season went on, I think that Space and Muse got better and better. Oops.
I love Space, and I think Muse has a ton of upside, but could they really assert their dominance over a premier tank line? I don't really love their chances all that much. There could genuinely be a tank diff in some of those critical matches against other contenders.
I feel like we definitely saw that early on. Like, with that Dallas game sticks out that first week when Hanbin and Fearless were just, like, superior. That's the kind of stuff that I was thinking of when making this video. Like, that those types of situations were going to play out. Just going to go over this vid or no? No, I'm also doing my predictions, my preseason prediction video after this one.
My other problem is that the coaching situation remains largely unchanged. Most of you know my opinion on DP at this point. He's just alright, and Season 3 showed that adaptation has been a real struggle for him. So what is going to happen when the Gladiators face off against a title contender? Will they be able to keep up in a battle of wits?
Against Shanghai, no, but against, like, other teams, kind of, yeah.
DP might have all the pieces he needs, but I don't entirely trust him to put it all together. Their potential disadvantages prevent me from believing they'll have a top 3 record, or win the region for that matter. However, they still...
I mean, you weren't wrong, ATP. I mean, they didn't win the region. They didn't have a top 3 record, well, points-wise, at least. Let's see. Hi from Sweden. What's going on? Welcome to the stream.
Should be outputting a solid season nonetheless. Number 3, the Washington...
Yeah, I really fell hard into that Justice hype train. I fell for it. I really did. I was so excited for Mag. I thought he was instantly going to be like one of the best main tanks. I thought Decay was going to, be a god like usual. I thought Assassin would be, a bit more consistent than what he showed us. And I guess Closer and Bebe, I trusted the process with them. I was never a big fan, but, like, I thought that Decay and Fury and Mag were going to, like, carry hard enough, but that was stupid of me.
Justice. I totally get it. This might be kind of risky and ridiculous in some people's eyes.
Yep, you're definitely right about that. It was risky and ridiculous at the same time.
Putting the Justice third when they have Bebe and Closer at support could be a really dumb idea.
It was a dumb idea. Very, very dumb.
And yeah, maybe it is. But I can't get over the
There is no maybe. It was.
absurd upside this roster possesses.
They did have upside. True.
I mean, holy moly. Mag Fury could be something special at tank.
At times they were.
What about the DPS? Decay very well might be the #1 DPS in the league this year.
Definitely not. I thought Decay was fine, but, you know, definitely not one of the best. He didn't even sniff the MVP conversation.
And you're backing him up with some pretty insane options. I mean, they basically have everything under the sun. Tuba and Assassin offer great flexibility, and Jerry helps out in the sniper department if they need Decay on Tracer. It's a solid rotation, and I have a lot of faith in guys like Tuba and Jerry to continue growing.
Tuba. I'm so sad he just didn't play, like, ever again at DPS. Like, oh, man. What he showed in the playoffs made me excited. Unlucky. Yeah, I'll have reaction videos for both of these post.
And getting better, especially when they're under the capable hands of that Justice coaching staff. I just feel like the bright spots outweigh the potential problems of Closer and Bebe. As mediocre as they sound on paper, deep down I feel like they're going to be good enough. Bebe has upside, and everybody's told me Closer impressed in tryouts very much.
Yeah, to be fair, even though I didn't love Bebe, he had his moments on the Spark in the past, and, like, Closer I should have just known wasn't going to be that great. I don't know what I was thinking.
Much, so you never know what could end up happening.
Maybe I wasn't
Ultimately,
thinking.
I like the odds of being halfway decent regardless, simply because of that coaching staff.
They were decent, like, record-wise, but that's about all they were. Mediocre, 9-7 record. Squeezed into the playoffs when I thought they'd be a top team.
Plus, the team around them is so incredibly stacked that I think they might play better just from being around those guys. I will say, though, I don't believe it's a guarantee that they're going to pop off, and I can't say for certain that they get exploited against some of the better teams in the league with a...
Oh, you were right about that one. They most certainly did get exploited against the better teams of the league. Those games where they weren't feeling it, or they just couldn't figure out the hero pools, or like some of those playoff games, they were ugly.
Solid support line. It could be the thing which keeps them from winning a championship ultimately, hence why they are no higher than third on my list.
Oh man, that was a rough one. But again, a lot of people thought the Justice were going to be decent, so, I mean, I definitely overrated them, but still, not the worst thing, I guess.
Number 2, the San Francisco Shock. Traditionally, I like to put the team who wins the championship on top of these things.
I'm happy I didn't put them number 1 at least.
Not really feeling it this year. More on why a bit later. For now, let's talk about how awesome the Shock are, because guess what?
they really weren't that awesome.
Still one of the favorites to win the title. Again, they're clutch, they're experienced, they're well coached. New faces or not, they still have arguably the deadliest support and take rotation in the league.
Yeah, if only I knew that FD God and Violet just weren't going to work out that well together.
And while the DPS took a bit of a hit, they're still incredibly strong with the likes of Striker and Glister teaming up. I see absolutely zero reason why they would not be a top team in the standings once again.
Okay, to be fair, they were statistically, with the numbers, one of the higher up teams. They won 12 games. They went 12-4, so that wasn't entirely wrong, Copium.
It's true that this team has never won their division before, but it's only a matter of time. Rules are meant to be broken, and the Shock know that all too well with how cheese some of their rosters have been in the past. The system is too clean. They have the winning formula down to a science. With everything pretty much being the same, they should defeat most of their competition without too many issues and will probably qualify for most, if not all of the tournaments.
If only I knew! If only I knew! They didn't make a single one! They didn't make a single regular season tournament! Not one! They missed all 4! Oh, man. But hey, at least they, like, made a playoff push at the end to make this seem a little bit better, I suppose. That's the hard Copium speaking, but I mean, if they'd beaten Atlanta, then they would have been in the losers finals.
I will admit, though, there is going to be a lot of competition, arguably the most ever this year.
Math. At least they got to Hawaii, Kappa.
Washington, Florida, Dallas, they all have the potential to beat them in certain scenarios, and that's just talking about NA, because teams like Shanghai and Philly are also viable threats in tournaments. This team is not invincible.
Philly also didn't make, like, any tournaments.
By any means, but still, you really do have to like their chances of winning NA and possibly the grand finals given how well-rounded they are. Maybe besides projectile play not being S tier, they basically have everything covered.
No, they did not. They most certainly did not. Would you say the DPS was the problem with the Shock? I think they just, in general, had issues. I don't think it was, like, one particular person. Like, I thought the support line didn't synergize that well at times, and maybe DPS could have played better here and there. Yeah, they also didn't have confidence, probably. After, like, I think losing to the Outlaws at the start boomed them a little, and then other teams were challenging them, like that game to Dallas as well. Which team do you think is the dark horse for next year? I'm not sure yet. I'd like to see every team complete their roster first. Yeah, Moth definitely was a big loss. And Striker retiring hurt as well, for sure.
You don't really get the feeling that there's a weakness which could be easily exploited by the other
there was probably a couple, to be honest.
Top teams in the league. The Shock are the back-to-back reigning champs. Them posting a solid record is practically a given.
And they did post a good record, to be fair. That's all. That's probably the only good thing I got right with this one.
Number 1, the Shanghai Dragons.
Hey, not horrible. Number 1, baby. It's funny because I didn't say they were going to win the championship, though. I had the Shock winning the championship, so, like, who really cares? Like, yeah, they were first place in the league, record-wise, points-wise, so that's good, but I didn't have them winning the championship.
I believe the Dragons have the strongest chance of finishing on top of the standings yet again.
Yay!
Keep in mind that I don't necessarily believe they have the better odds of winning the title compared to the Shock.
You should have thought that.
I'm more so thinking about who's the most likely to dominate the regular season.
And they did!
The Dragons have the best shot.
And they did! They won 2 tournaments! Woo!
In my opinion, they have the strongest DPS rotation in the entire league.
That kind of aged well. I mean, actually, no, I take it back because they didn't have a rotation. The rotation was non-existent. I take that back. I'm thinking starting lineup. They had the best, like, starting DPS, sure, but, like, the rotation, they didn't have anyone off the bench. They all either, like, retired or they just didn't play. Like, Dion was there for a little, but that was it.
Fleta is the best flex DPS in the game and the reigning MVP. Diem is a top-tier sniper. Lip is a young superstar
Diem Sag.
Who can only get better from here. And Erster provides that extra flexibility.
Erster Sag.
Both with a unique playstyle and a diverse hero pool. All of those guys can completely take over a game. Speaking of taking over a game, Void is still here after an MVP caliber season, and despite Fate being a bit worse than Fearless last year, he's still coming off a comeback season. And don't forget that he is being reunited with Coach Moon, who he arguably had the best Overwatch of his career under. And I think their supports get the job done. Lee Jae-gon is great, and both Izayaki and Molly can be solid A-tier level flex supports.
I underrated Izayaki. He was even better than I thought. He kind of moved up to S tier. Actually, there's no kind of. He did move up to S tier. What I think of the proper hype? I think it's pretty warranted. He looks pretty darn amazing.
The Shock roster, in some people's eyes, honestly might be a little better, but I expect the Dragons to be more dominant.
And they most certainly were.
Less teams who can stand up to them consistently because of where they play. Things seem largely unchanged compared to last year. This region is still theirs to rule over with an iron fist. They are clearly superior to most, if not all, of the other teams in Asia, and pretty much all teams in general for that matter. With inter-regional play being a thing this year, maybe they can prove to have a better shot of winning the title than the Shock. If there's one team who can put an end to this reign of terror that we're dealing with, it's the Dragons.
Hey, not bad.
They were right there with them last year, and they nearly took them down to the losers bracket in the playoffs. If they can elevate their game to the next level, who knows what might be possible. But either way, I'm expecting another excellent year out of the Shanghai Dragons with title aspirations on the horizon. It would take a collapse of epic proportions for them to have a disappointing year. And that's going to do it.
There you go. So, in terms of like good takes, bad takes, I'd say that the worst takes were probably like Atlanta, Houston, and Washington, and teams along those lines. Houston, Atlanta, and Washington were all terrible. Florida, I mean, not my fault, but obviously it didn't really age well. The Paris one was really bad, but again, I don't blame myself too much for that one. Other than that, I mean, it wasn't the worst. I mean, Chengdu I could have put higher, Seoul I could have put a little higher. NYXL was another bad one. In terms of teams that I think I like kind of nailed, Guangzhou, I thought my take on them was like all right. Obviously, like the worst teams like Vancouver and London and the Valiant, I knew they weren't going to be good. Most people did. It's whatever. My Boston take was okay. My Toronto take was, speaking, I think this might have been my worst power rankings ever. But what can you do? That's about it, though.